This is a great collection for the price, but I do think it needs a little bit more polish. The collection was announced in a Mario 35th Anniversary themed Nintendo Direct, and oh boy, the reception was mixed before it was even released. Once it came out on September 18th, it was even worse. Fans complained, and they were loud. Some reasonable, and some not so much. Now that the hate has somewhat died down, I thought I'd share my thoughts about this collection now. The collection contains 3 of Mario's best 3D adventures: Super Mario 64, a landmark, Super Mario Sunshine, the forgotten classic, and Super Mario Galaxy, to some the greatest Wii game of all time. All of them are emulated and work wonderfully, but just feels a bit off, especially in Mario 64's case. Speaking of which, Mario 64 is not only running at 720p for some reason, it's also based off the Shindopak Tao version of the game, which is essentially an enhanced bug fix to the original game, released 1 year after the original Japanese version of the game. It basically included a lot of the fixes that the international version of the game received. At least the game didn't have drab colors and input delay like the Virtual Console versions of the game. The Shindo version also removes the backwards long jump, a speedrunning technique that gives you so much speed you can pass through certain triggers and solid walls like a fat Italian bullet from Brooklyn. I'm not really losing sleep over this exclusion, to be honest, mostly because there is a technique that can only be found in the Shindo version of the game. I mean, granted it takes longer, but it does the same thing as the butt slide. And yes, that's what it's called in Japan. I wish I was making that up. Otherwise, it's still Mario 64 at its core. Let's move on. Sunshine is the only retro Mario game in the collection to run in widescreen. And yeah, the controls also had to be changed because digital buttons. I mean, sure, you can play with the GameCube controller, but it's not going to be the same as the original because the GameCube controller is recognized as a wired Pro controller. I mean, hey, you get used to using the R and ZR buttons to spray water, but for those purists, it's not going to be the same. The cutscenes also run in stretched widescreen. I mean, thankfully it's not as bad as Disney Plus early Simpsons episode. Oh god, that was bad. Mostly because there's not a lot of detail on the top and bottom of the screen to begin with. Also, that haze effect has also been toned down, and the picture's not as washed out, thank god, even though it's still somewhat washed out. Other than that, that's about it. To keep things quick, Super Mario Galaxy has better feeling motion controls, and you can use the touchscreen in handheld mode, so that's a plus. You can also press a button to spin like in the NVIDIA Shield release of the game, in case you don't feel like moving your controllers up and down and all around. This also works with other actions as well. You can also activate Co-Star via the menu, and it might be a little strange since it uses motion controls instead of an actual pointer, but hey, you know, you'll get used to it, just like everything in this collection. Other than those changes, it's still the same gorgeous-looking Wii game from 2008, now running in HD. Seriously, this game actually still looks great even today. Not only does all 3 games receive a resolution bump and dialogue changes, but you can also listen to the soundtrack for all 3 games as a bit of a bonus. At least you don't have to pay scalper prices. Speaking of which, my biggest complaint with the game is not the emulation, the controls, its price, or even the for the time jank. No, it's these dreaded words. That's right, you have until March 2021 to purchase the game, not just physically, but digitally as well. A bit of a money tip. Do not buy the physical versions of the game, unless you found it for cheap or you've already pre-ordered it. Scalpers have already gotten to it. You're not even subtle anymore. So if you can, save yourself the headache and get it digitally on the eShop. Due to COVID-19, I don't really expect a lot of people to rush out and purchase this game, since money for most is really tight. And because of this limited release practice that they're going for, people won't be able to get this collection ever. If you're watching this video after March 31st, 2021, just emulate all 3 of them. People have done it for years, so who cares? Honestly, I do think these games would have benefited from a native port similar to the Mario 64 PC port that actually ended up getting DMCA'd by Nintendo, so yeah, that's pretty bad. But hey, I'll take what I can get here. And by the way, now's a good time to remind you that Nintendo actually owns the source code, so what's stopping them from natively porting these games over to the Nintendo Switch? At least you can finally play all 3 of these games on the go with no compromises. For those watching in the now, however, get the game digitally. Otherwise, you're not really missing out on much. Don't let that fear of missing out get to you. Also, don't let the salty Nintendo fans get to you. They're the ones who already bought the game. Rivals of Aether feels like competitive Smash Brothers, but done way better. That comparison's not going away anytime soon. In fact, it's just gonna permeate throughout the whole video. I could just end this entire video right here, but I'm not going to because this game's really damn fun, and I want to talk about it. Not only because of the recent release of the Definitive Edition on Nintendo Switch and Steam, don't worry, they're the same game, but I also started playing it more often in my spare time since the release of the Definitive Edition, and I wanted to talk about it, using the same format I used for 3D All-Stars. Yeah, that's gonna work really well, won't it? If you're familiar with the gameplay of Super Smash Bros., you'll feel right at home with this game. On the surface, it may sound more complicated than Metal Gear Solid, and playing the tutorial may not help, but don't worry, once you're in battle, and after maybe playing the basic tutorials, it all comes naturally. Just like Smash Brothers. If you couldn't tell, the game's speed and fighting mechanics are based off of Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I know fans will defend this until the year 20XX, but I'm just not a fan of playing the game competitively. I know, gasp. The problem lies within the controls for me. It's so stiff to the point where it becomes a problem, especially when it comes to the advanced tech that fans discovered. And keep in mind, Smash Bros. Became a competitive game by complete accident, and it was never meant to be played like this in the first place. Rivals takes that formula and not only makes it competitive from the get-go, but in my eyes, it's also easier to get into, competitively or casually. With Super Smash Bros., you have to look up a lot of the advanced mechanics online, including character frame data. That's if you're into the competitive scene. Rivals mitigates the need for an online guide, because the game does a really good job explaining most of the mechanics to you, via an in-game tutorial. I mean, Rivals tells you about directional influence, for crying out loud. A mechanic that makes you live longer in Smash Bros. And how long did it take for Smash Bros. To acknowledge directional influence? It's not a one-to-one Melee clone. There are some differences between the two games, I do have to stress. Like, for example, you can't grab or throw your opponents for more combos, there's no ledges, and there's no shields. Shocker, isn't it? To replace what was lost, new stuff had to be added, and others needed more prevalence. To replace shields, you use parries, which leaves your opponent vulnerable for a short time if it connects properly. It's almost similar to the perfect shield, except you actually have to push the freaking button instead of releasing your shield. And since there's no ledges to grab onto, every character has a wall jump, which refreshes your recovery if you already used it up against a wall. So, there's plenty of opportunities to get back on stage, even without ledges. Other than that, it hits the same beats as Melee. High risk, high reward combat that can get pretty nasty if you're skilled enough. Your hands can also rest easy as there's little to no mashing in Rivals. What do I mean by that? In Smash Bros., if you get buried, fall asleep, or your shield breaks, you'll have to mash the buttons or rotate the control stick quickly to get out of it faster, which gets harder and harder the more damage you have. Unless it's Witch Time or Snooze in the Air, in that case you're kinda screwed. The whole series permeates from this, by the way. I'm just using Smash Ultimate for footage because it's easier. In terms of playable fighters, sure, it's not much compared to Ultimate's 70 to 80 plus fighters, which there's more on the way, Christ almighty. But what's here is fantastic. All of them are original characters with two exceptions. Ori and Sign from Ori and the Will of the Wisp, and the titular Shovel Knight. Take a wild guess where he's from. They were both downloadable content along with 4 other fighters that you originally had to pay for, but the Definitive Edition mitigates that entirely, as all fighters are playable right out of the gate, and that's fantastic. If you own the PC version of the game, that roster just grew even more thanks to the Steam Workshop. You can't do this on Nintendo, am I right? The Workshop is pretty much the make it or break it ordeal when it comes to this game, and what will you find on the Workshop? You'll find characters that either fit in alongside the main cast like Palm, and yeah, I feel like they really should be DLC, ports or remakes of what some fighters may play like in Rivals, 2 in particular that come to mind really should be Switch exclusive at this point. Meme characters, I don't know why they're here. Work in progress stuff, which is like the majority of mods on this thing, I don't frickin' know why they're here. Or you'll find some 100% accurate characters and Ronald McFreakin' Donald. The last 2 are the shut your brain off and have fun type of characters. I mean, goddamn, the community can get creative and crazy at the same time. I should stress the base roster is still fantastic, so if you bought the game on Switch, don't feel bad. As we all know, with platform fighters, whether it's Smash Brothers or other games, it's more fun with friends. And there are other modes available to keep you busy in case you can't see your friends due to 2020 being 2020. Like an online mode that is not only fun, but it actually friggin' works. And it gets updated frequently. Unlike... Still bitter about it, mostly because we have to pay for it now. Another multiplayer mode included is Tetherball, which is exclusive to the Definitive Edition, and that's pretty self-explanatory. Still fun either way. Practice mode allows you to train on your own pace, the Abyss mode is just an endless horde battle with a boss fight thrown in every now and again, and the story mode just exists. It shouldn't take you long to finish the story, however. Before you know it, you're just right at the final boss. Finish the story and you get a second custom color slot for all the base roster fighters. Yep, you can create your own custom color scheme for the base roster. Personally think it's the best part of the game, next to the Steam Workshop support on PC. I really think so. You're still able to use these costumes online, but no one will be able to see these costumes but yourself. I also forgot to mention you can use Workshop characters online, but you won't be able to play with Workshop characters unless you and your opponent subscribe to that item on the Steam Workshop, even with strangers, so keep that in mind. There's a lot that'll keep you busy for a while. Whether it's unlocking those little buddies, getting those milestone rewards, messing around with modded buddies like this one, or even creating your own crazy fighter and stages to go alongside with it. This is just bound to keep you busy for a very long time. especially because all the single-player modes are available from the get-go with the Definitive Edition. Yeah, I'm bringing that up again. But that's not all. If you want more Rivals of Aether, there's this free visual novel on Steam called Lovers of Aether. I will explain. This places the Rivals cast in a high school with the typical looking for a date for the homecoming dance plotline. For an April Fool's joke released last year, it has no business being this polished, and I fully respect the dev team for that. Hell, I'm using a song from Lovers of Aether as we speak. God damn, I love this soundtrack. Even better, there's more on the way. Keep an eye out for this stuff. It's some really good stuff, I'll tell you that. If you love Smash Brothers and want a change of pace, hate Ultimate's online system, or hate the later Smash titles because it's not Melee, then play this game. Get it on PC if possible. Specs shouldn't really be a problem as you don't really need a beefy PC to run it. It's also available digitally on the Switch's eShop with no PS4 release planned as far as we know, and the Xbox One version is as abandoned as this sentence right here. I mean, what Xbox One version? Mod support is non-existent on the Switch, so if mods aren't your cup of tea, then just get it on Switch, or just avoid the workshop. I don't know. Don't know why I'd want to do that, but it's your choice at the end of the day. The game right now costs $30 on Steam and $37 on the eShop. If you think that's too steep, wait for a sale. If not, then go nuts. You won't regret it. Who knows, some up-and-coming Rivals YouTuber might make a dozen Young Prodigy videos on their channel. Hey, don't look at me, I'm not the one behind bars. Reviewing a demo. Daring, are we? The main review's taking a little longer than expected, so this will be a holdover until the next review. Obviously, it won't be a full review because it's not out yet. I'm taking a look at a demo, hence first impressions. The demo for Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was announced in a surprise Nintendo Direct partner showcase. Nintendo likes to soft release this stuff, huh? I saw the Direct and thought to myself, might as well make a quick video on it if the first chapter is short. So I got to recording B-roll, and after playing for 2.5 hours, I had to make it into a rush review instead because goddamn, it felt long. I'll explain later. The plot of the game takes place 100 years before the events of Breath of the Wild, and I can just summarize it with one word. Yeah, this small egg-shaped guardian traveled back 100 years to warn our heroes of the eventual fate of Hyrule. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you'll know what I'm talking about. If not, I'm stopping here. Deal with it. In terms of gameplay, it's just like Hyrule Warriors, with a Breath of the Wild paint job. Although the first Hyrule Warriors was just Dynasty Warriors with a General Zelda skin and fan service, so is it okay to call this a skin of a skin? Age of Calamity does include mechanics that were in Hyrule Warriors Legends and Definitive Edition, and yeah, I didn't play those two. I only played the original Wii U game. But inclusions like swapping playable characters in the middle of battle is a very welcome addition in my book. It's still Dynasty Warriors despite the skin. One versus many with dumb AI companions and a frame rate that drops more than Trump's self-esteem. The demo contains 3 playable characters. You start off with Link, and eventually you'll be able to play as Impa and Zelda. You also have access to the rune abilities as the demo progresses, like Stasis, Magnesis, Cryonis, and... Thanks to the runes and the special abilities that each character has, it really freshens up the combat compared to previously. Also, get used to the combat, because that's all you'll be doing. If you're going into this game thinking that it's going to be another open world game, you'll be sorely disappointed. It's just a linear chapter-by-chapter Breath of the Wild prequel, now with invisible walls. The demo allows you to play through the first chapter of the game, along with the ability to carry over your save data to the main game. That's a positive. It's about an hour and a half long, and the thing was, it felt longer, and that's not a good thing. For the most part. After you clear the first chapter, the game doesn't tell you that the demo ended until you try to select anything from chapter 2. Is this pre-order material for me? Nah. I'll probably wait a bit before making a full review. And all I can say is, try the demo for yourself, and see what you think. This review might be a little shorter than the others, but hey, what are you gonna do? You gotta rush this stuff out, am I right? Will I live after the next Rush review? Probably not. But I'm willing to attempt to walk out of it alive, because it's a popular game. Oh boy. It's so popular right now, no one's shutting up about it. No, like, seriously, shut up. Among Us is a game of manipulation and deception within the vast emptiness of space. It also proves that people are really dumb, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Whoa. Whoops. Wrong script. Yeah, it took me a while, but I had to completely rework the entire script. Hope that explains why you guys got the Age of Calamity demo instead. The original script was a little too whiny and negative and came off as me hating the game rather than being indifferent towards it. Some of my opinions still stand, while others had to be completely changed to sound less negative. Also, the game's overall popularity is not the reason why I'm indifferent towards this game. Keep in mind, just because a game is popular doesn't mean it always gets a free pass, even if the game was gifted to me. You'll also notice I'm kind of stalling right now, so let's just speed this up. Oh, and before we speed up, I want to just point this out real quick. 34.3% of people who watch my stuff are not subscribed to the channel. So, if you enjoy my content, and want to see more from me, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to be notified when a new video like this comes out. Alrighty then, let's speed up. You have two teams, imposters and crewmates. The crewmates have to do all the tasks given. Most of it's either upkeep or just playing a game of asteroids or something. The imposters have to kill all the crewmates to win. Doesn't matter how they do this dirty deed, as long as they can get away with it scot-free by going through vents, sabotaging vital equipment, or throwing anyone under the bus during meetings. And speaking of which, once a meeting is triggered by either finding the dead body or by pushing the big red button, the game goes from doing your tasks or die trying to Ace Attorney with armless bean people. This is where everyone discusses who did the dirty deed of murder on a crewmate, or have an excuse to just accuse others. If you are the imposter, you have to do everything in your power to stay alive, by putting other crewmates or even your fellow imposters under the bus to save your own ass. Basically just spew a bunch of bullshit out of whatever orifice you have and hope to God people will buy it. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? The big problem for me in the official game is, believe it or not, the people playing sometimes. The game is best played with a trusted group of pals on Discord or any other service you use, because public lobbies feel a bit brain dead, and people always vote a random color regardless on whether or not they're suspicious. And also, I may have been confused for a woman at one point. I don't know whether to laugh or die internally. I was still voted off either way you look at it, but I mean, hey, at least no one can hear you scream. And I mean that literally in this case, since the game requires that you stay silent when you aren't in meetings. The game may end quickly without this ground rule. And that's another thing about this ground rule. If you don't know about it, you're done for. And yet another problem with this ground rule is the dead silence that accompanies it. Doesn't matter if you're streaming the game or playing it on your own or even recording footage for this game, it just feels dead, pardon the pun. In certain games, I kinda prefer to be dead. Sounds morbid, but I'll explain. Even in death, we still have a purpose, they all say, since dead crewmates can still do tasks without fear of getting killed if a fellow crewmate got voted off or killed. You know, there's probably some sort of commentary about this, but I'm pretty sure someone's already said this before. At least the game has a simplistic art style that brings me back to a time when Flash cartoons and games were everywhere. Hell, developer Inner Sloth made Dig to China and the Henry Stickmin collection, both former Flash games. Rest in peace, Flash. Anyway, is the game worth $5 on Steam when the game is free on mobile devices? Well, it depends on who you are. At least both versions have cross-platform play, so at least you have someone to play with. Although, I'd recommend you avoid public lobbies for two reasons. One, the people, as stated earlier, and two, the spam bots and hackers that are plaguing public lobbies right now. The developers might have fixed this by the time this video is uploaded, but play it safe and don't go on those servers for the time being. My opinions on the game from the original script have certainly softened, but I just probably won't play the official game very often. And I'll admit, I didn't spend much time on this game. I just have other stuff to do, you know? Like work on this video and other games that have been taking over my life. It just really didn't click with me as well as it should. At least I had fun with the rounds I played, but that's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. I also know that there's some people who can get very defensive when I give feedback to the popular game. But remember that quote from earlier. That'll come in handy whenever I review games from the past, present, or future. Popular or washed up. Who knows? However, if you paid attention, I said official game a couple times. Yeah, there's a version of Among Us in a lesser-known game you may have heard of called VR Chat, created by the user Jar. It recreates the Skeld map from the official game. In my eyes, this is the best way to play the game for me. You don't have to mute yourself since the game can handle that for you, unless you're in a Discord call, through spatial audio. It's also actually really fun to be the imposter in this map. I'm not kidding. Whether you're on desktop or in VR, this map provides more depth that just keeps me coming back, unlike the official game. And it's all thanks to the human dynamic, or just human nature entirely. I mean, sure, the original game has that too, but you have to stay quiet for the majority of it until you get into meetings. And it's more than just stay silent, run, stab, and then just spew BS when needed. If it keeps me coming back, then that's a positive in my book. Although there are still some problems with the map, and it's not because of the map itself. You're still at the mercy of VR chat's shitty optimization, coding, and server issues that still plague the game like 3-4 years later, but the map is still fun. I didn't get any footage of it, but I have photos with friends to prove it. If VR chat decides not to go into cardiac arrest or any synonym for pulling a Bethesda, then play this map. You won't regret it. This is unofficial, however, so I do recommend you support the original developers when necessary by playing the game on Steam, iOS, or even Android. Otherwise, well, go do something else. I'm not your father. Well, then again, I don't want to be one, so I honestly don't know what to classify this game as. Maybe a musical sandbox game? Yeah, that sounds about right. Fuser was developed by the acclaimed music developer Harmonix, who were responsible for Guitar Hero, Rock Band, Dance Central, Amplitude, and tons more, including Drop Mix, their previous endeavors with Hasbro. As we all know, Drop Mix really wasn't a big success, and the tech from Drop Mix was actually pretty good, so they had to reuse the tech somehow. And whatever wizardry they used, the songs sound great no matter the tempo or key of a particular song. For the most part. The tagline for this game is anyone can be a DJ, and that statement is very true. When you first boot the game up, you start by creating your DJ. They can be a good looker or an absolute abomination. Or you can just hit random for a few minutes and see what you get. Once that's done, you're booted into the campaign, which is basically an extended tutorial, introducing you to the mechanics bit by bit. And it does a good job telling you how everything works. It's also the only way to unlock some stages and features that you can play with later, like custom instrumental loops. There's also some clothing items you can get for your DJ if you get 3 and/or 5 stars on your performance, or complete the headline set to unlock that DJ's outfit. It doesn't matter what stage of the campaign you're in, the premise is the same throughout, and the writing for these characters is the equivalent of a baby boomer trying to fit in with a Gen Xer. It just doesn't work. I'm sorry, I had to get that off my chest. Anyway, let's move on. The gameplay is somewhat similar to DJ Hero with none of the plastic, and you're not playing along to a cover. Instead, you get to make your own mix. Basically, all the songs available are samples, and you get to arrange them yourself. When it comes to implementing these samples, it's as simple as pushing a button, dragging it, or storing them for later for a sick drop, or bringing them in right away for some nutty combinations. In terms of songs, oh god. When I nicknamed this video the Digital Millennium Copyright Trap, I wasn't kidding. The base game includes 100 songs plus 25 extra paid DLC tracks that are included with the extremely expensive VIP edition. However, some of the songs included need to be unlocked with music tokens. 200 per song. But wait! There's more! What? To get more clothing and style options for your DJ, they not only require you to be at a certain level, but some of them need style tokens to unlock. Luckily, there are no microtransactions in this game, but if it gets implemented right after this review goes live, someone's going to be a ghost, and stuff like that. And the payout for this stuff is actually kind of pathetic, so please fix that. I honestly really wish I could show off some of the mixes I created, but I actually can't. Because I could get DMCA'd for just breathing the same air as Billie Eilish. I'm not kidding. It's hard to describe these combinations without actually hearing it for yourself, so I do recommend you take a look at mood mixes from the official Fuser YouTube channel. It's really great stuff, and it really gives you an idea on what kind of combinations you can get, especially with songs that really shouldn't work. As we all know, no game is perfect, and my problem with the game is the game portion of it. Let me explain. Once you grasp the basics, it feels like you can actually get too good at this game, to the point where the game elements really get in the way. And that's probably why I've gravitated towards the freestyle mode, which is arguably the best mode in the game. You take your crate, which is a small selection of songs out of the 100 plus, and you go hog wild and party like the pandemic never happened. You can even bring a buddy in for some co-op or competitive action online. You can even drop in with 8 others to spectate a performance, or you can perform with 3 others for that social distancing party you've always wanted to attend. Other than that, that's kind of it. Aside from the very rough-looking hair and the abundance of clipping issues, the game looks nice. As to be expected running on Unreal Engine 4, there's always room for improvement, you know? The game is available on Steam, Xbox One, PlayStation 4, and Nintendo Switch. I bought the game on Steam and hadn't run into any technical hiccups, but I did run into a few visual hiccups. A couple of them I didn't record, but hey, at least it was funny. Fuser is one of those games that really satisfied the musical itch that I've been craving since the Rock Band franchise left my life. Electronauts tried to fill the musical void, and to its credit, it did well, but it really didn't have any substance that kept me coming back. Beat Saber is just DDR with lightsabers, and Audica, Harmonix's VR title, is just Beat Saber with guns. However, just like Audica, Fuser is getting songs as paid DLC, and to be honest, I'd rather paid DLC than microtransactions. In fact, in the middle of making this video, there's a season pass available now. Judging from what's now available, it should be promising. However, is Fuser worth $70 for the base game or $130 for the VIP edition? No. I am aware licensing popular music is very difficult, especially when it involves an industry that has the shadiest practices you could ever imagine, but it's just too damn expensive. If you have to play this game, wait for a sale. Cyber Monday's just around the corner, and the Steam Winter Sale won't be too far off either. By the way, pro tip for the campaign, please play it in short bursts. It is not worth marathoning. Says the guy who once marathoned Persona 5 and got the bad ending in like a week. Take it from me. It's not worth it. I know I said I was going to take a break while working on the 2020 video, but I thought I'd give you guys a Christmas gift this year. A blast from the past, you could say. The game's initial release date was 2017, and yeah, don't be fooled by the $21 price tag. What you see here is the entire game. It's just Gladiator with a hint of physics giving up on the occasion. I can't give the game that much flack, because it was released around the time that consumer VR was still brand spanking new, and the HTC Vive was the centerpiece for most VR setups. I mean, I'm using the Oculus Rift S, and it sure is playable, but I think it was meant for the Vive ones. You'll immediately pick up the controls right away, so don't worry about the controls. What you have to worry is the content. There are 3 floors with 3 regular fights and a boss. Beat the boss and you move up, plain and simple. After the 3rd floor and a very trippy as hell final battle involving floating heads, what the shit. That's kinda it, really. Sure, you have custom game, but that's essentially an endless mode with all weapons available to you. Some weapons need to be unlocked, but the premise is still the same. You just have to basically beat the piss out of your opponents until you've had enough or die. If you don't want to use weapons, you can pull body parts off of them, but that requires you to stun them first. And it's kind of unreliable for the most part since they get out of stun so easily, and because of your slow speed, yeah, don't even think about it, Sonny. Thankfully, if you manage to kill someone before this eye closes, you can actually walk it off. Don't rely on that. There are 20 weapons in the game to choose from, but my favorite weapon has to go to this blunderbuss looking thing, because if you aim your shots just right and provide the right amount of force when firing, this can straight up kill opponents, leaving them in an unrecognizable mess of blood and chunks. Sure, the bow can do the same thing, minus the explosion part, but once you run out of arrows, you're kinda screwed. Unless you face off against opponents who have bows on them. I didn't get much footage of this game due to how basic this game is, and this happening. Oh yeah, and the moment I let go of my gun, it just yeets off into space, never to be seen again. Thanks, physics. I'm sure you've noticed the violent imagery in this game. There is an option to turn it off in case violence is ever a no-no in your family or you're not comfortable with blood. Think of Gorn as the VR equivalent of junk food. It tastes good, makes you feel good, but only on the short term, and for some reason is sold at a premium. Just to simplify, this is not one of those games you get virtual reality for. It's available on both Steam and the Oculus Store if you want to play it, but there's plenty of other VR games to play. Might I recommend Half-Life Alyx and Beat Saber, or even Blade and Sorcery. Throw in Robo Recall for Oculus users. Hey guys, look, I'm being original. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this. 2020 was a terrible year to start the new decade. Obviously, I'm not gonna talk about everything that happened this year, because we'd be here all year. It'd be 2022 by the end of this. So, I'm gonna be talking about the more interesting parts of 2020, or the loudest parts of 2020 in this case. The obvious thing that happened for me was pretty much reviving this channel and later creating Rush Review, but it's not about me, this is about the world. Let's start by going into a rapid fire of sorts, in no particular order. And by the way, I can't show any of this stuff here, so you're gonna have to settle for recreations or stock footage when necessary. Also, please subscribe. You guys remember when World War III almost happened? Anyone? Well, that was something. What the hell was that about? These giant killer hornets just appeared out of nowhere, and they appeared how many times? It's so forgettable, even I forgot about this. Well, at least they found the nest. Yep, big tech has you by the balls. Please support alternate tech whenever possible, and if you're watching this video on Odysee, hi. Anyway, this monopoly is just gonna get wilder from here. Australia was set on fire, not only injuring people, but almost destroying its wildlife. Good start, guys. This pandemic really crippled everything and demonstrated the worst of humanity. Now that we've been through a real pandemic, however, does this mean we'll get good pandemic movies now? I hear Songbird is promising. This might be a bit too much for some, but it needs to be said. George Floyd's death caused the biggest butterfly effect in history. You guys know what happened, so I won't go repeating myself here. Also, riots. Riots everywhere. We really shouldn't be putting celebrities up on a pedestal. Doesn't matter if they're a YouTuber, esports player, Hollywood celeb, premise is the same. Some allegations turned out to be true, with tangible proof, while others may have been made up for internet clout. The reason why I say may is because you know how hard it is to find the truth these days? I mean, because hey, when they own the information, they can bend it all they want. I really do hope the real victims got what they wanted, but for those who are doing this for the clout, just stop. Remember when TikTok was almost banned in the US? Well, that was a real shit show, I'll tell you that. We've all dealt with this spray tan baby for 4 years, and at this point, I don't think we can handle another term. He may have lost, but that doesn't mean he's willing to leave the White House without a fight. He's just making everything more difficult for all parties involved. Just accept your defeat and go back to the golf course, because it feels like you're better at playing golf than being a good president. I'm sneaking this one in because this was the worst launch for any product ever. Nvidia's RTX 30 series cards were released in September with very limited supply, with scalpers having more stock than the manufacturer. Oh, and fun fact, the same thing happened with the 2 next-gen consoles that released last month. Enough about hardware, let's talk games. There were a lot more hits than misses this year in my eyes. At least from what I've played anyway. Some provided a good escape while we were all stuck inside during mass quarantine, and some were just a form of torture in an ultra-thick box. At least Cyberpunk finally came out after 3 or 4 delays? I may have missed something, so please let me know in the comments below what I missed. I just hope we can all learn from our mistakes. Now Nintendo, on the other hand, as a game developer, Nintendo makes some A+ content. As a company, why do they keep shooting themselves in the foot like this? It's a madhouse! Look, if Microsoft cares more about the Smash competitive scene, there's a problem. And that's also the same company that bought Bethesda, so I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to buy Nintendo at this point. I am definitely going to be weary of their future titles moving forward. After the Smash Fighters pass, of course. Good games don't mean shit when you treat your community like trash. I'm sorry, but it has to be said. And before you claim Nintendo hater in the comments, let me just remind you of the Wii U. Yes, I own this thing, so your argument is automatically invalid because I supported Nintendo at their worst. This goes for anybody who bought a Wii U during its heyday and is ballsy enough to criticize Nintendo like this. Excluding games, 2020 was trash, without a doubt. We all know the rule for 2021 going in. Do not talk about 2020. Alright gamers, riddle me this. What game series is the textbook example of don't knock it till you try it? The game that should pop in your head is the Animal Crossing series. The first game that I personally played in the series was Animal Crossing City Folk on the Wii. Now, I have a lot of memories with the now defunct Nintendo Wi-Fi service. In fact, those memories were so good, I bought New Leaf a few years after launch. I didn't like this one. Oh, get a load of Mr. Unpopular here. Thing is, I wasn't ready for the changes New Leaf kind of threw at me, so I promptly dropped the game. After 3 spin-off games nobody asked for, an amiibo-centric update for New Leaf, and a Wada Wada Plaza-themed Animal Crossing app on Wii U that got delisted from the eShop a year after releasing, a new Animal Crossing title was released. It quickly became the perfect distraction from the fact that a pandemic forced us indoors, the economy crashed, and society was collapsing. For that one guy or gal in the back who doesn't know what Animal Crossing is, it's a real-time life simulator where something is always happening every single day. What you do with your time is up to you. It's the same thing in New Horizons, but with a twist. You're building a town from the ground up on a deserted island. You'll also eventually get the ability to modify the terrain in case you don't like the placement of that lake or you want to create that wall or fall. In other words, don't worry about the look of your island starting out, since it can be changed once the building permits become available. Just don't expect all that stuff right away, because it takes a very long time to get to that point. Again, you and 2 others arrive on a deserted island with nothing but the clothes on your back. What do you expect? You also can't even explore the full island until you've crafted the vaulting pole and the ladder for traversal. And yes, you heard that correctly. There's crafting in this game, because of course there is. You'll need to craft the series staple tools this time around, and it gets tedious real fast. The footage speaks for itself. This also leads into the worst mechanic in this game, and is something you'll encounter very, very early on. I hate this mechanic. It doesn't matter what kind of tools you have, flimsy, upgraded, or the series staple golden tools, they'll still break, and it's there to just waste your time. No other reason. Combine that with the crafting issue from earlier, and there goes your precious time and sanity after a while. For those who played the game day one, there wasn't a lot you could do within the given day. Some of the newer returning features that were introduced in this game are either disappointing, passable, or it sucks and becomes a problem. In fact, there are so many inconsistencies and problems that the game never tells you about, I've compiled them into a small list. Let's start from the top. Oh, I think I've made my point. But even with all these complaints and problems, do I still recommend this game? Absolutely. The game's calming and welcoming atmosphere makes it accessible to anyone, along with the simple control scheme that anyone can grasp. New Horizons is also the least punishing game in the series, so if you slip up because you can't play every single day, then you can actually get back into the game without punishment. Although, do I really consider guilt-tripping a punishment? I don't think so. For me, as a fan since City Folk, that's a different story. I want to enjoy this game, but somehow some mechanics or gameplay elements just bug the shit out of me. Well, thankfully it's a completely different experience these days, since the game received plenty of updates throughout the year. Oh, and also, this game is still full priced, so if this seems like something that would interest you, then go nuts. If not, you can safely wait for a sale or ignore it. Look, peer pressure may be a bitch, but it's not worth paying $60 for the chance to have pissed off Marshmallow or Mr. Kitty Conover on your island. You guys familiar with XBL and PSN? Well, here's Nintendo coming in with a service that I like to call not so optimal. Everyone and their grandmother knows this service, so let's just speed this up, shall we? Online plays peer-to-peer stabilities on a game-by-game basis. It's either playable or unplayable with absolutely no middle ground. NES and SNES games? Okay, cool novelty, but Nintendo blew their load a little too early and now they're drip-feeding obscure crap whenever they feel like it. And I really mean obscure crap. Cloud saves? Well, not all games support it, for one thing. That, and some games clearly need it more than others. If you really want to back your saves up for free because there's absolutely no free alternative, get that microSD card and paperclip ready and don't let the bad hammer hit you on the way out. The mobile app just exists, and these special offers, well, they're not really that special now, are they? Look, everyone's made the joke at this point, so I really don't know what I could add to differentiate myself from others. I've been forced to soften my opinions due to the fact that 1, time is one hell of a mistress, 2, it's doing well, and 3, Nintendo keeps pushing the service, and 4, people forgot to scream. There's also plenty of alternatives for many of the stuff within the service. I mean, for online play, you could just hook up an emulator and Parsec, or just use the emulator itself. If you also paid attention at the beginning of the video, yes, support the original developers whenever possible. I already mentioned an alternative for the cloud saves, but if you want to play NES and SNES games, you can either make one yourself or buy an NES and SNES Classic and flash some games onto it. If you can find them for a good price nowadays. With the mobile app, it is possible to voice chat. Well, that's what Skype and Discord are for. And plus, for those special offers, I'd recommend looking elsewhere. Just don't look at eBay because, oh dear, if it wasn't clear enough, I don't like this service. I won't be renewing my subscription often, but if I'm going to be renewing my subscription, I won't be using the 1-year subscription, which, by the way, is actually about to expire soon. Looking at it with the lens of 2021, your mileage may vary, and it almost feels like gambling in a twisted sense on whether or not you're going to enjoy this service. Oh Jesus, that's actually very depressing. Either way you look at it, it still just feels like an excuse to just put something that was once free behind a paywall with barely any improvements. The real kicker here was that Switch Online was once free until Nintendo was like, here's the prices, now start paying next week. Also, for those who still want to play on the Nintendo Switch, there's a bunch of games that do not require a membership. Never understood why that's the case, but you know, whatever. Their rules, I guess. And also, hold the phone for a second. Windows 98 checks? Huh, no wonder you had to replace that infrastructure. What do you get when you cross an indie Kickstarter campaign with everyone's favorite blue roadkill? You get a Sonic fan game that later turned into its own thing called Freedom Planet. Nice! This game ended up flying under my radar for the longest time. I actually remember a friend showing me the demo and yeah, that was that. I'd completely forgotten about its existence. A few years go by, I bought the game during a sale after hearing its positive reception, played it, didn't click with it, then I promptly put the game down and went to go play other things. Until recently when it needed to get my backlog in order. Gotta love that, huh? Anyway, there are 2 modes to choose from once you get a file set up. There's Classic Mode, which makes you play through 12 of the 14 stages, similar to the games it's trying to emulate, while Adventure Mode does the same thing, but throws a story into the mix. And it's not great, mostly because, one, it drags, and second, the story does not know what tone it wants to go for, leading to many instances of tonal whiplash. I don't know if that's an actual term, but I'm coining the term now. At least the voice acting's great throughout, but the sound mixing, on the other hand...
How come George doesn't want to hang out with us? He said he had some work to do. He's probably just scared of getting cooties.
If these dialogue boxes weren't there, I'd be singing a different tune. I played the game through Classic Mode off recording a while ago, and I personally had a decent time with the game. It took me about 3 hours to beat on my first playthrough with Lilac, one of the 3 playable characters in the game. Her and Carol are playable from the get-go, with Mila being an unlockable character. All of them have unique and useful abilities that set themselves apart from each other and your typical Sonic Archie OC. Designed by Ken Penders. Oh yeah, I am storming through all these. Alright, to speed things up, Lilac is the best for your first playthrough, since she has a lot of moves that are basically the best for crowd control, and blasting off in any direction that isn't directly north or south. Carol is there for some extra challenge with a slippery wall jump, Chun-Li's, and a surprisingly fast yet fragile motorcycle that not only comes in one color, but it's the year's hottest new model. And Mila's platforming chops are the best in the game, but she struggles in boss fights due to her smaller health pool, slower top speed, and abilities that take longer than... I was going to make a Cyberpunk 2077 joke right there, but that's just too easy of a target. When it comes to bosses, including the final boss, they're all pretty good, except for these character battles which just evolve into happy slaps to see who dies first. And if you play like a games journalist, say goodbye to those meaningless lives and continues. Unless you care about the no death achievement, then you have the right to cry. There's also a ton of collectibles for those completionists out there, and once you find and collect one during a playthrough, no matter the character, they're yours to keep, even if you start a new file just to change your character. For those looking for a good 2D platformer that's outside the veins of Sonic the Hedgehog, it's an easy recommend. 15 bucks? I say it's worth it. Besides, outside of major Steam sales, the game really doesn't go on sale very often, and there's a sequel on the way, so strike while the iron's hot, folks!
Make your selection now.
The title is no lie. I am taking a look at the most infamous video game of all time. You thought Cyberpunk was infamous? Nah. You clearly haven't seen the likes of Action 52 and Cheetahman 2. After seeing a whopping 2 videos on the subject, I had to try it for myself, just to form my own opinion. I did this with Sonic Forces. What could possibly go wrong?
I clearly made a huge mistake!
Half the games here don't even work. Even if you can get it working, most games are just carbon copies of each other due to how many space shooters there are on this goddamn cart. We should just call it Action Shooter 52. Or it's just a poor man's version of another NES game. Would you believe me if I told you the price of admission was $200?
Here's the fucking money, shithead!
I even converted the price twice. Oh my god, why did I do this? Bring it to today's value of money, and that's $405 US right there, god damn. Oh, wait. It gets worse when you go up north. Not even their prized baby Cheetahman is worth the price of admission. And before you ask, yes, it's just as buggy as the other games. And yes, it was an attempt to compete with the TMNT, but we all know what happened there. They did get a standalone sequel, which became one of the rarest NES games ever, and then they fall off the face of the earth, forever. Let's make it worse. You know the game Ooze? You can't miss it, because the game always starts you there, no matter what. There was a contest that was basically rendered unwinnable because of a crash that happens without fail on the 3rd level, even on emulators without proper tweaking. They knew how broken it was, but they still went through with the contest anyway. I can safely say with confidence, this is the worst NES game of all time. Hell, I can go on record and say that this is the worst video game of all time. But let's be honest here, it can get worse. Like, a lot worse. You know what? Why not? I'm willing to break my own rules for the sake of showcasing some talent. It's my show and no one can stop me. I'm sure you guys have noticed by now, this isn't an official Sonic title. Instead, it's a fan game created by a small team led by Gabriel Gonzalez, all running on a Unity-based engine created by Daniel Coyle. I heard about this thanks to Garrulous64 about Sonic fan games. But yeah, to skip ahead a bit, I was actually looking for a new Sonic game to play because Sega was silent and it was very disheartening. Team Sonic Racing's multiplayer was dead, and of course, Forces blew. And I've played Sonic Generations more times than I could count. Starting the game, I'm sure a lot of people would probably pick Adventure Mode. The plot of said mode is really nothing groundbreaking, but at the same time it gets the job done. The same goes for the voice acting. Although Sonic and Mighty sound so similar to the point where Mighty just sounds like the cooler Sonic. Just don't play as Mighty in Adventure Mode, or you may have more questions than answers. When it comes to gameplay, it's certainly Sonic alright. The sky's blue, the grass is green, and Half-Life 3 will never be confirmed. Okay, how do I describe this? It's like Sonic Adventure, combined with the speed of Sonic Unleashed while boosting. To quote Garrulous64, bringing him up again, it just does something to you. I cannot put into words how satisfying the speed can be. Chaining drop dashes with modern and classic Sonic, using Mighty's hard shell to make obstacles look like speed bumps, flying over the stages with Ray if you know where to place him, boosting with Metal Sonic at the cost of rings and freaking brakes, Shadow's Chaos Kick, I don't know how to use this properly, and absolutely breaking the entire game with Super Sonic. Oh yeah, and skip the start post and time attack mode and it's essentially free roam. It's actually the best way to get the collectibles in the stages without the timer going, hurry up, dipshit, you're on the clock. You can also use this opportunity to take pictures with the game's photo mode. The photos look a bit rough, but hey, at least it works. Just make sure you turn off the HUD before you take a photo. The collectibles I brought up earlier are the Chaos Emeralds, these emblem thingies, and these metal parts in Hidden Base Zone. The game even tells you how to find these collectibles when you even finish Adventure Mode. However, yeah, this is a fan game, so jank is essentially inevitable. I've had moments where I went so fast, physics and collision just straight up gave up. This made some challenges in challenge mode easy, or the bane of my existence. The sound mixing is also a bit all over the place. For example, the bosses have the most annoying hit sound ever, and it is loud. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but I've also had a few moments where the game forgets what input was held. Mostly when doing tricks, I've noticed. Basically, if you want to know how to do this, while you're airborne, just hold the left bumper and then press any of the face buttons to do a trick, assuming you're on the Xbox controller, and assuming you're playing as anyone but Classic Sonic. You'll either get a ton of airtime, or just break or boost like a goddamn dope. It's a kick in the nuts to your run when it does happen, but you can negate this issue by quickly trying again before you become a sitting duck. Aside from all that, it's a damn good fan game that I really do think you should try. I'll leave a link below if you want to check it out. It's not only a good break for your wallet since it's free, but hopefully it gives you something else to play before that new Sonic game comes out next year. Also, can we give a shout out to Sega for not being Nintendo?
I want to state that Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
You know, I would give you a crash course, but if you've been on the internet for more than an hour, you'll know that this kind of history is all over the place. If you want to find out for yourself, it's a quick Google search, but for now, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version of it. This is sickening. This is too sexy for my virgin eyes, despite the fact that we took this scene out of context. Who made this filth? Don't answer that or I will kick you out of this goddamn court. We need ratings for this filth so we don't poison the minds of our youth. Look, I'm aware it's a bit mean and over-exaggerated, but you know what? They did it first, so I can get away with it, right? Of course, developer Digital Pictures took advantage of this newfound clout by putting it on everything that had a controller at the time. After the Mac OS and MS-DOS Director's Cut in 1995, the game was presumed deceased. Until a board game developer years later ported Disc 1 to a Samsung phone, uploaded the footage anonymously to the internet, then got in contact with one of the guys involved with the original game once it gained traction, and the dude was like, I was hoping to eventually release the game, and he was like, alright, we'll work something out. The guy known as Tyler Hogle founded Screaming Villains and ported the game to every relevant platform. And judging from the footage you saw earlier, I think you know which version I'll be playing. In a mess. I don't know where to put this plot summary, and I'll explain later. The police was alerted to the disappearance of some teens last seen at the Martin Winery estate. The Martin family was questioned and claimed they left safely, while also refusing to let the police search the property, basically telling them to fuck off. The case was then handed over to Special Control Attack Team, or SCAT, who investigated the property, and figured out that the house is not only armed to the teeth with traps, it also has hidden cameras in every room of the house, even the bathroom. Control of the cameras and traps are given to the player along with the safety of 5 teens and undercover agent Kelly, played by the late Dana Plato. The place is also infested with these things called augurs, half vampires on the brink of starvation. And yeah, the Martins turn out to be vampires trying to keep said augurs alive with enough blood to live, but not enough to become full vampires. Tony, one of the family members, would warn them to leave because one of them bears a resemblance to an ex of his and doesn't want her to die. I mean, come on, that's what sexual tension will do to you. That arc goes nowhere because he slipped down the slip and slide of death.
Say hi to your ex for me, bitch!
Kelly then calls in a SWAT team while the Martins are streaming, and of course, that backfires horrendously. Depending on your actions, the story can play out in different ways, meaning there's multiple endings, but this also means certain events can later bite you in the ass if you screw up, causing one of the bad endings. And you don't want that, especially because you need a perfect game if you want to unlock the game's extras. Think of Five Nights at Freddy's without the jump scares. Remember those augurs I mentioned earlier? You gotta catch them with the traps. Miss too many of them at any point during the story, and it's game over. Don't get too comfortable with the traps, however, because the Martins will switch the code every now and again, represented by a color. Without the right code, the traps are as useless as the magic hands from Sonic Adventure 2. But a certain someone's gonna find use out of those magic hands, so I'm just gonna shut up now. By the way, what you're seeing right now is the entire game. If you get a perfect game, you can actually kill Dana Plato if you want to. I mean, that's one way to go out, aside from an accidental overdose. Aside from the playable prototype, the cut content, the swappable HUDs, theater mode, production photos, documentaries, interviews, quality of life changes, and more, it's still the same game from 30 years ago with a fresh coat of paint. And yeah, this game's gonna turn 30 next year. How's that for some gray hairs? It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's worth playing at least once to say, I played the game that created the rating system that thinks gambling is okay for kids in a basketball game, but not for Mario or Pokemon for some reason. Let that sink in for a moment.
Yeah, right.
This is a great collection for the price, but I do think it needs a little bit more polish. Boy, I really said that, didn't I? And you know, come to think of it, has it really been a year already? Yeah, Rush Review's now a year old. Now all we gotta do is get him off the breast milk by the age of 2, maybe 3. Well, Mario is technically dead, and I'm hearing conflicting reports on his death. But I am known for revisiting dead corpses, so let's just, revisit a dead corpse. Super Mario 3D All-Stars, the worst kept secret that everyone is now supposed to forget. For those who missed out, it was just a full-priced collection that got the Disney Vault treatment for stupid reasons. Emphasis on was. I'm going to put a little twist on this revisit, however. Instead of talking about how disappointing 3D All-Stars was, like the 5 million other content creators, I'm going to point you in the direction of alternative ways of playing these games. Like the 5 million other content creators. The obvious alternative would be just play the game on OG hardware, but that's just a cop-out. And besides, disc rot and hardware deterioration are a thing. You guys remember what happened to the OG fat PS3s? Thank God emulation exists. Which is solely the reason why I can't link anything in the description because of how cutthroat Nintendo is. Anyway, on its own, Super Mario 64 is not the hardest game to emulate. Hell, 3D All-Stars emulates the Shindo ROM. The All-Stars version also still has a 4:3 aspect ratio. I don't mind it, but if you're gonna use it, at least fill up the screens for Christ's sake. Plus, there's multiple versions of the game. OG N64, Shindo, DS, Wii, Wii U, Samsung Smart Fridge, Tesla Car, your vibrating dildo. But what if you wanna go deeper? This is where the PC port comes into play. This right here proves that fans can make a better PC port than even the developers themselves sometimes. You will need the original N64 ROM in order for this to work. Sorry, all 4 Shindo players. And you will have to do a little bit of tweaking behind the scenes. But once you get its dependencies up and running, it is by far the best way to play Super Mario 64. I won't go over the dozens of versions you can choose from, but if you're an achievement hunter, one of these versions will make you nut. Now, the version that I'm talking about is the Render 96 project, along with the Odysee moveset mod. Just make sure you set Cappy to no capture in the settings if you still want to use him as a platforming tool and don't want the Bowser fights to be living hell. What am I playing? Undertale Genocide? The Odysee moveset mod gives Mario new moves to play with, and of course, they break the game in half since the game wasn't built with these movesets in mind. Do I really have to explain it? The footage speaks for itself. There's even post-game content in the form of silver stars you can enable in the settings. And you can play as Luigi, Wario, and eventually a secret character that I still haven't unlocked yet. Now that's a lot of content! It feels like every 3D and some 2D Mario games made love to Mario 64, and this was their devil baby. Hi, this is Greenboy from the future, and I just wanted to let you guys know that the amazing camera that's provided with the PC version of the game doesn't work properly with 4 stages in the game. The 3 Bowser stages, they work just fine, it's just that moving the camera left and right works like the original game. It's no big deal. Big Boo's Haunt, on the other hand, is just unplayable. You have to re-enable the classic camera if you want to just have a playable experience on that stage. For the record, I cleared my directory and recompiled everything, and I still had these issues. Don't expect a fix for this, however, because Nintendo DMCA'd the project because they hate fun. I decided to lump Sunshine and Galaxy together because I legitimately could not find anything for these 2 games. That and the Mario 64 section ran on a little longer than I anticipated. The only thing I found for Sunshine was Super Mario Sunburn. It adds a ton of quality of life stuff that Sunshine confusingly lacked. Sunburn even brings back the long jump, and Shadow Mario can use it too, sweet Jesus. Even if you don't feel like playing Sunburn, you can easily improve your game with a widescreen code, HD texture pack, and a 60 FPS patch, because the final game ran at 30, confusingly enough. You can even use your GameCube controllers on PC with Nintendo's official hardware. And even though Galaxy already had widescreen and a smooth frame rate, you can still use an HD texture pack if you so choose. But when it comes to mods in the vein of 64's PC port and Sunburn, I couldn't find anything. Like, nothing. Most of the mods that I found, like Super Mario Gravity, Neo Mario Galaxy, and Outer Mario Galaxy, were for its sequel, Super Mario Galaxy 2. Oh, that's right, they didn't have Galaxy 2 in All-Stars. The only other version that I know of is the NVIDIA Shield TV port of the game, which was only released in China. But what I heard through the grapevine, it has better emulation than what 3D All-Stars had.
You guys want to get meta? Try emulating 3D All-Stars on the Switch emulators. Oh boy, that is some Inception level shit right here. I wonder if Mario and Bowser will fight in that rotating hallway. Nah. They won't go for such a crazy idea like that.
Well, it was only a matter of time, to be honest. You can thank creator Scott Cawthon for creating the internet zeitgeist that refuses to die. A few years had passed since the OG FNAF was released, and I ask, is it still worth playing? Or is it just for the sake of being a part of the conversation? And yeah, I'm looking at the first 3 games, which means I'm not looking at these games, because I either don't own it, can't find it, or I didn't put much time into it. All 3 games have you sit and survive. You have to make sure none of these animatronics get into your office. And if one of them gets in, they'll stuff you into a costume full of animatronic parts. That means death for the most part. You know, for kids. You're a night guard on night shift from midnight to 6 AM. And then after your shift, you come back the next night because you really hate yourself. Pass all 5 nights and the bonus night given to you afterwards, and you get custom night, where if you set everything to the max level, it's basically a how fast can you die simulator. When it comes to the first game, is it worth going back to nowadays? My answer is a simple one. A clear-cut, oh god no. The first game uses your mouse for everything, opening and closing doors, turning on and off lights, and even using your cameras. Did I also mention that the game's pacing is unbearably slow? And to skip ahead, screw you, Freddy. Out of all the animatronics in Freddy's posse, he's the worst of the bunch. Because when he starts coming out, it feels like he strikes when he wants to. I had to stop after night 4 because of him. At least with the other 3, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, you can easily keep them at bay. All 3 of them can be dealt with by shutting the blast doors. And don't forget to open the door once they're gone because the building is running on 6 AA batteries, so shutting both doors and calling it a night is a practical way to get greeted with a big old bear hug. If you do run out of power, just pray and hope for the night to end if you're in the home stretch, or accept your fate ahead of time with this lovely rendition of the second half of Le Torador from Carmen. Why the second half? I don't know. But that doesn't stop me from doing this. And since I suck at segues, look alive, it's FNAF 2. Second verse same as the first with a distinct lack of doors. And a better fuse box. Along with new and old looks for the Fazbear crew, we also have some new faces. Like the Marionette, who will have a temper tantrum if his mixtape stops, and Balloon Boy, who just wants you to die in the dark like a bitch. And since the employees of Fazbear forgot about Mangle, I will ignore her too. All the animatronics are kitted out with facial recognition tech that can easily be exploited with an empty Freddy head. Withered Foxy and the Marionette, however, will see right through that bullshit, so you might want to keep them in check often. You still have to deal with the mouse to activate most of your stuff, but with your flashlight, it's on a keyboard key. Thank you! You can even use the flash an animatronic while looking at the cameras. Honestly, I had an easier time jumping back into this game compared to the first and third game, probably because of how everything just flows nicely. I managed to finish the first 5 nights without issue. Okay, I did screw up trying to get my bearings, but it was smooth sailing after that. If you can't handle this game's crazy difficulty curve, then stay the hell away from FNAF 2. This is considered the hardest game in the series, but I think it's the most satisfying game in the series once you get everything down. I guess that's why it's one of my personal favorites in the series, and it's way better than 3. In that game, the pizzeria becomes a horror attraction, and some idiot found vintage stuff when a location burnt down, including this spring-loaded corpse named Springtrap. He's the only one you have to worry about from Night 2 onwards. You just have to keep him distracted with audio cues. Pretty simple, right? No, it isn't. This is the most frustrating game in the series due to its stupid difficulty curve. And you thought FNAF 2 was bad? This is worse. The first night is just a whole bunch of nothing, and then it's just kick city with how fast everything can go south on you. If you lose sight of Springtrap at any point, consider it a game over, because he's probably staring right at you and you didn't even notice. To make it worse, your cameras, audio devices, and the damn ventilation can go off momentarily. That means you need to restart it, or you're left wide open. But you're left wide open anyway because you can't do jack diddly squat until that thing that needs resetting is fully operational. I wouldn't mind this if the phantom hallucinations weren't so invasive. These things are nothing more than a distraction, since you need to reset the ventilation after a cheap jump scare from them. We're also back to the mouse-only shtick from the first game, making the game feel way slower than it needs to be. Simple stuff will cost you vital milliseconds, and oh look, he's back at it again with them bedroom eyes. I'm not interested, take the hint, goddammit! I had to stop after the second night the difficulty curve was so bad. And there was no Easter egg to save me this time! I've always seen the series as a conversation piece. Nothing more, nothing less. After FNAF 3, I was horribly burnt out. I stopped following after that. Just look at the release of the first 4 games and you'll see what I mean. From what I've gathered, this series is still going strong thanks to content creators making content on the game. I say as an absolute hypocrite. At least you won't be breaking the bank if you want to give the OG games a shot. And you know what? I say give them a shot. What's the harm in that, right? By the way, new rating system. Hope you like. Huh. So that's what the beeping was. Well, I might as well conclude here. I hope everyone has a happy and safe Halloween this year. A beloved game from a certain hedgehog turns 10 on November 1st, so that's going to take priority for next time. It was prepped way before the rating system was conceived, so you might not see it next time. Well, might as well just sit here and wait it out in the dark. At least it can't get any worse, right? Mother. I know what you guys are thinking. And yes, I'm gonna resist the urge to repeat the sentiment everyone's heard of before. But one day I'll recite it in full for the lulz. Nah, the real question is, why am I looking at Sonic Generations at all? The game turned 10 this year, and I wanted to ask, is it still worth playing in 2021? Short answer, yes!
By the way, there is a 3DS version for those who still care. But interest in this version of the game depends on one simple question. Do you like 2D Sonic? Well, how about a faster 2D Sonic? Not interested? Well, this game isn't for you. I will talk about this version in full eventually, but for now, I just want to talk about the HD version of the game.
The story is painfully simple. It makes me wonder why I put the spoiler bumper in the first place. May I remind you, this kind of practice almost killed the franchise once before, and they almost did it again. Twice. But we all know nobody plays this game for the story. We play it for the gameplay. The game is split into 2 acts, classic and modern. Classic Sonic's gameplay is similar to the Genesis games, only with sometimes wonky as shit physics, and a stupidly powerful spin dash. So powerful, in fact, that I bugged the camera multiple times. And did this. Whoops. Then we have Modern Sonic. It's the boost gameplay from Unleashed in Colors, and since we aren't on the Wii, it's like a streamlined Sonic Unleashed before the formula became an automated bland fest. Although I love Modern Sonic's fast-paced and energetic gameplay, I am absolutely sick of the 2D sections. It was fine in Unleashed in Colors, but with classic Sonic in the fray, those 2D sections feel a bit redundant. And no, the stilted platforming doesn't help either. In terms of levels, character battles, and bosses, excluding the final boss, they're all from his past, with added bells and whistles to make each fight feel fresh, which was really needed in Silver's case, and I think you know why. I'm gonna go out and say this now, the final boss is also just the worst in the HD version. I'll gladly give points to the 3DS version for giving you more things to do before you can strike the core. Oh, and you don't have to suffer through this. Now that's a drinking game for the suicidal, I'll tell you that. The game isn't that long either. You could technically fully complete the game in a weekend if you're dedicated. But if you're not Beardman over here, it's 5.5 hours, give or take, according to howlongtobeat.com. At least you'll get supersonic for your troubles in the HD version. You get nothing in the 3DS game. If you don't have an Xbox 360 or PS3 lying around, the PC version is the best version of the game. It's not only dirt cheap on Steam, but you get a smoother experience with little to no load times, assuming you have the right specs. It also comes with its DLC involving Casino Night Zone. It's pinball. That's it. The PC version is also a modder's paradise. From character skins, new and old stages, audio mods, and even a ton of visual and quality of life mods. Hell, why stop there? Let's throw in the Unleashed project for good measure. But what else can I say that hasn't been echoed to high heaven? I am aware it's not the most original Sonic game, but it's still worth your time and money, even 10 years later. At least it's better than these games, that's for sure. When Sega doesn't feel like kicking the blue blur into a blue paste, they make a separate dev team to make a game about the Japanese mafia as a side hustle. You know, one of the deadliest criminal organizations in Japan. Sounds like a great idea for a game series. The first game was a PS2 exclusive released in December of 2005 as Ryuga Gotogoku, and in September of the following year it was released in North America under the name Yakuza, with Europe getting the game 10 days later. What I'm looking at, however, just to skip ahead, is the Skyward Sword of the series, Yakuza 0, released in 2015 for the PS3 and PS4 in Japan, with the rest of the world getting the PS4 version 2 years later. Doesn't really matter because I'm playing the 2018 PC release of the game. Also, I feel bad for Xbox One players because they got the game 5 years after its initial release. But at least you weren't like my friend the Moon back in June. If you've never heard of the Yakuza series, I wouldn't blame you for asking, to be honest. Mostly because the games did meh in North America and Europe for a good while. But in Japan, they were a big blockbuster success. So big, some of the games and supplementary materials never left Japan. In fact, the series itself almost stayed in Japan. That's how meh it sold in the West. But at least Sega knew what free marketing was. I've vaguely seen bits of the game before, you know, a trailer here or there, other content creators talking about it, collaborating with other Sega IPs, etc. I sat on it for a bit, even when the memes hit their peak, until one of my best bros gifted me 0, Kiwami 1, and Kiwami 2 on Steam as a recommendation. In terms of story, for how absurd it is, it's good. Like, damn good. I honestly can't bring myself to spoil it, it's so good. So I won't. I'm only gonna say this, however. It knows when to take itself seriously, and it knows when to give you a good laugh, especially when some of these moments are played out of context. Yeah, that's just beautiful. And when I said this was the Skyward Sword of the series, I meant it. Chronologically, this is the first game in the series, and Kiwami 1 and 2 add continuity from 0, despite the fact that those are remakes of the first 2 games. Confused? Don't worry, I was too. Gameplay-wise, you have a couple decently sized areas to explore, with encounters, perks, and equipments, just like a typical JRPG, with a hint of deadly fisticuffs from a beat-em-up, so I think it should be more appropriate that it's called Ajurb. And jumping ahead here, the combat is so damn good. You get 2 characters that you switch out every 3 chapters until you get to switch between them later on, Kiryu Kazuma and Goro Majima. Both of them have 3 styles that cover specific needs. Simple damage dealers, slow tanks, fast chip damagers, the works. You can even throw in a bat for good measure, even in enclosed spaces because I'm a dumbass sometimes. Excluding boss fights, since they require more thought, most enemies you encounter just go down the same way. Watch your ass, wail on them with your fists, weapon, or an object in the area, assuming you're using a style that can carry certain objects, and finish them off with a heat attack when the heat meter is full. Just make sure you keep the pain train going to keep the meter full, or else you won't be able to... Okay then, ignoring the numerous counts of murder on display, there's plenty of things to do outside of combat, along with a shit ton of minigames to do. There's also sub-stories, side quests that are just as good, if not better, than the story itself. However, my biggest problem with this? All this side content makes the game feel unnecessarily bloated. Granted, a lot of this stuff is optional, unlike the second and third act of Skyward Sword, but you're going to be interacting with some of these things at least once in a playthrough, and that is why Mr. Shakedown is one of the worst enemies in the game. He loves showing up near phone booths just to waste your time, and if you die to him, you lose all your money. Because of that, every time I spot him near a phone booth, I have to find another one across the map just to save, which means I run into another sub-story, and then the cycle repeats for 30 plus hours. God end my suffering. Also, there's 100 of these sub-stories. 100 of these sons of bitches, 60 for Kiryu and 40 for Majima. So could you blame me for stopping it all? Alright, well, for something different, visually, the game looks great on PC, and its presentation is quite good, but its roots as a late PS3 game are incredibly obvious. However, the PC version is shockingly stable, with a silky smooth frame rate and fast load times with no hiccups. Oh, and after doing some digging, I should stress, a couple graphical settings cannot be disabled by default. So, unless you use mods that disable it, you're SOL if you don't have a good graphics card. It shouldn't be a problem for most people, but I felt like I should bring that up nevertheless. And speaking of settings, the game is shockingly customizable in that department. Not in graphics, but in everything else? Holy crap. You can even choose to unlock the frame rate in these cinematic cutscenes that ran at 30 FPS on PS3 and PS4. That's cool, at least. I am aware some of my opinions on Yakuza 0 are very unpopular, probably. But goddammit, I at least had fun with the game. Or at least a good time. It just burnt me out with its schizophrenic pacing and sub-stories showing up when I really don't want them to, which is some of the biggest problems for me. And, despite the admittingly scary concept of the 400-year-old Japanese mafia, the story itself is fantastic and is oozing with that charm that only Japan can provide. I will say, give this game a shot, but if you want to get into the series, you have to start with 0. There's no getting around that. And if you like what you played and want to keep going, the mainline games are very accessible these days. Wait, who's calling? It's finally over. The prophecy can finally be fulfilled. I promised myself that I would review Super Smash Bros. Ultimate once all the DLC was completely finished. It took a few years, a couple dry spells, 2 DLC passes, and 1 cancelled project on my end, but we're finally here. I am aware I haven't taken a look at all the Smash games, but you know what? I'm willing to give you my quickfire thoughts on each. I don't really plan on reviewing all of them individually, so check the top corner for the rating. It definitely feels like an experiment that I think paid off. It's kind of average these days, so only go back to it if you want to know where it all started. Now, this is where the series really got started, and later Smash titles would be built from this foundation. Melee was also so rushed, it spawned a competitive scene by complete accident, much to Nintendo's dismay. Casually, it's a lot of fun. Competitively, it's too stiff, as mentioned in the Rivals video. Plus, there's a ton of issues that depend on the hardware you play it on. Just try to get those fixes or emulate the game to mitigate these issues. And while you're at it, throw in that 3.0 memory card and roll back netcode for good measure. This was the first Smash title I played, but I'm not going easy on it for the sake of nostalgia. The game may be content-packed, which, yeah, that's the best part of the game, but gameplay-wise, it's far too slow, too floaty, and has tripping. It would have scored slightly higher if the game's disc wasn't so fragile. Even early Wii models had issues with the discs. The Wii U's not immune to this either, by the way. Oh, and this was also the introduction to third-party characters on the roster, and an online mode. It sucked. I didn't fuck with this footage, by the way, that's actually how it was. It's more well known for its 8-hour story mode, the Subspace Emissary, and its modding scene. Holy shit! These are technically considered different entries, but I'll be treating them as one for the sake of simplicity. Both versions have identical rosters, but you do get different stages and modes depending on the version, plus connectivity between both. It sucked. This was not only the first Smash Bros. On a handheld, but of course Wii U gets the edge for it being on a home console, but these were also the first games to have balance patches, whatever that meant, and downloadable content. 7 fighters became available as paid DLC for both versions. One of them destroyed the competitive scene for the game overnight, even after a patch. The games are nowadays more well known for their awful menus and dumb mechanics. At least the amiibos were a cool novelty, and the online was actually decent. It wasn't perfect, but it was playable. This finally leads us to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and yeah, this is ultimately the ultimate package, pardon the puns. They brought back every single fighter from Smash history, and they made sure you didn't forget it. And they brought in newcomers on top of that? God damn! The hype was real, and by God was it worth it. Starting out, you only have the original 8 fighters from Smash 64, but don't worry, you'll end up unlocking the others in no time flat. Even if the CPU might kick your sorry ass into the pavement with little to no remorse. I am glad I decided to play Classic Mode to unlock all the characters, because this is the best Classic Mode in the series thus far. A set path that's chock full of fan service? Ooh, yes please. Oh, and I almost forgot, look at all these stages! And not only can you play 8-player Smash on all of them, but you can also toggle stage hazards. And there's Omega and Battlefield forms of all of them! And the music, oh my god, there's so many of them! Not every stage from Smash history is here, mind you. It's quite a shame we never got some of those stages as DLC. Not everything is there, false advertising, don't buy this game, it's a piece of shit. The game as a whole also looks beautiful on Switch, and it runs at a consistent 60 FPS. Gameplay-wise, the game got a lot faster this time around. It's not too fast, but not too slow, and it's like the perfect sweet spot between Melee and Smash 4, only without Melee stiffness and whatever the hell Smash 4 was. I ended up getting the most out of a lot of local multiplayer modes. Some make their proper return, and others make their debut. Oh, and 2 others were also added in via free updates. Aside from classic mode and local multiplayer modes, everything else just reeks of meh. All-Star mode is completely neutered. Online matches via quick play are very fickle, even with preferences on and an Ethernet adapter, what the hell. Online modes are lacking, and Spirits modes is just collect all the PNGs with status effects. However, if you want a true time sync featuring these PNGs, you play World of Light, this game's story mode. It is 40 plus hours of nothing but spirit battles. No. Just no. It's far too long for its own good. I'll gladly take Subspace Emissary over this. It's a shame boss battles didn't return with how many bosses are featured here. There's 10 of these guys. In terms of the DLC fighters, oh my god, it was a roller coaster. It all started with Piranha Plant. Wait, what? Anyway, combining both packs, we have 6 heavy hitters, 3 disappointments, 1 indifference, and 1 magical finale. And now, here's the completed roster. Savor every last slot. This will most likely never happen again. Honestly, what else can I say about it? It's Super Smash Bros., the game that has given players a fun local and online experience for almost 20 plus years now. It's honestly a must-have if you own a Switch, but if you're only in it for the online experience, you might want to go look elsewhere. It's not like the game's getting any more content anyway, mostly because the final balance patch came out just a few days ago. At this point, they might just throw in bug fixes for the rest of its existence. And before anyone asks, I want Smash Ultimate to be the last Smash game for a good long while. Mostly because trying to top Smash Ultimate would just cause inevitable disappointment. Nintendo's also making a ton of bank off this game, so it'd be stupid to announce another Smash title right about now. Besides, you don't want to burn people out. You guys remember what happened to Guitar Hero? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, you guys forgot about this game? This game was handled by Sumo Digital, who have worked on 2 other racing games starring the Blue Blur, and those were pretty damn good racing games. This game, though, just cruises by with the bare minimum. Most of the modes here are just there to just tick a mandatory checkbox. We've got local races, single-player adventure, and... Yep, that about sums it up. The thing that somewhat sets this game apart from other Mario Kart clones is the team mechanic, which does explain the roster. Somewhat. Team Sonic and Team Dark are who you'd expect. Team Rose replaced Cream with a bunch of chows because they drive better than a 6-year-old for some reason. Silver and Blaze are paired up with Vector, probably because SBO's dealing with Charmy's brain damage and he was the only one available. And Zavok? What the hell are you doing here? Aside from that, everything checks out. Gameplay-wise, it gets the job done. It's basically Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing with a hint of luck if you're not playing with actual players. Good luck with that, by the way. If your teammates are slacking, then you have a lower chance to get first place overall. And so, you pretty much have to fill up this meter at the bottom by helping out your team. Once the meter is full, you have access to a team boost, which makes you completely invulnerable to everything except bottomless voids and solid walls at the push of a button. I do like the team mechanic, it's just way too luck-based with CPUs. Well, thankfully there are standard races if you don't want to deal with that, but that just accentuates how bland this game is. The adventure mode is just a bunch of challenges with a story that isn't very good. I didn't really feel like finishing it, nor will I ever finish it. To be perfectly frank, the only reason you'd want to play story mode is to get those pods, where you could spend them on this roulette to get a chance to get a car part that you want. Why is this a goddamn loot box? There are no microtransactions in this game, thank God. So this is just kind of a nuisance. And a bit annoying because I keep getting mostly crap. To be positive, the game actually looks and runs great, and loads relatively fast on PC, Xbox One, and PS4. The Switch version's a bit rough though, but that's to be expected at this point. And the music is the best part of the game, and they friggin' knew it. Because that's all they did to promote the game, just show us music and absolutely no gameplay. But you know, let's face it, we have the internet, and if you want to listen to the soundtrack, just look it up on YouTube. I don't think I want to pay $50 for a glorified soundtrack. To be transparent, I bought this game on sale for like $10 to $13 a couple years ago, and I felt like I got my money's worth after, I think, a few hours. I'd be singing a different tune if I paid $50 for it, especially with a paperweight called De Nouveau DRM in the PC version of the game, which is still there, by the way. I will say this now, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed is a better package. It's cheaper, and is more content-packed in comparison. Not to say TSR is bad, it just exists. Much like this review if you couldn't tell how long the video is. Anyway, you can safely skip this one. At this point, I'm just waiting for Sonic Frontiers. but this revisit is kind of warranted. Why? The game drastically changed since I last looked at it. And keep in mind, I reviewed this game when it was somewhat brand new last year, and thankfully the core game really hasn't changed too much, even with the numerous bits of paid DLC and free updates. Basically, grab a crate of songs and go to town creating whatever cursed mashup you want. You're booted into career mode when you first boot the game up, and it's still the same generational mishmash of cringe writing. It's a bit long, and there's a bunch of stuff that's handled a bit sloppily, but at least I finished it. It took me about a year, but it's real weird. I would show you, but we all know how draconian the record labels are, and screw it. I got nothing to lose. They send your mix into space, which changes depending on the snapshot you take at this point in the 2 AM set at Star Glacier. Take a listen. Honestly, I have no clue if this is considered fair use, but then again, corporations don't care about fair use, as we've seen time and time again. Thankfully, they added a stream-optimized category for your crate, meaning you can easily find and choose tracks that won't get you thrown in a cell. And of course, shortly after the original review, they've added hot clips. Press and hold the corresponding button down on a track in your crate, and you essentially have another temp disc slot. The volume can be a bit inconsistent. Sometimes it's fine, and other times you can barely hear it. I don't know why that happens, but it does. Please fix. Keep in mind, I'm playing the PC version of the game, and I caught a lot of sometimes very distracting quirks. Most are attributed to not having an internet connection or setting yourself as invisible on Steam or your service of choice.
What the fuck?
The biggest crime, however, is not being able to completely mute the crowd. I have a fix for PC users. Just remove 3 bank files from this directory. And I'm sure you've noticed, I've spent more time in the freestyle mode than any other mode in this game. I still stand by my statement as this being the best mode in the game, mostly because the other modes are not that good. Co-op freestyle is just freestyle, but very, very limiting. I have no idea how to play this battle mode, even after reading the instructions, and there's a battle pass, I'm not too fond of that. And there's this new diamond stage, which is just co-op freestyle with a wait time. Okay, now for the bullshit. These fictional currencies are getting annoying. You had 2 when the game first launched. Style points for the look of your character and stage, and music points for some base game songs, effects, and instruments. And now there's diamonds, where you can spend it at the diamond shop or buy slots for the diamond stage. Look, I know there's no microtransactions in this game, I'm grateful for that, but you're teetering on the edge of live service, and that's just as annoying as an actual live service game. The only thing I bought with those diamonds were a couple tracks and this. Nothing else mattered in that shop, except the free stuff. I like free. Even after all this, is the game still worth playing? Oh hell yeah. I do remember saying it was far too expensive for its own good, but since then, they dropped the base price down to $30. Still a bit steep for what it is, but you could do a lot worse. And hey, there's even a demo for all platforms, and after looking it up, it's just the first stage of the campaign. I'd say give the demo a shot if you don't want to fully commit just yet. Either way, it's still a game I think you should try out. Just watch out for the record labels if you decide to stream the game. It is a war zone out there.